15 miles off the coast of Iran, in the middle of the Persian Gulf, there is an island most people have never heard of. Civilians are banned from visiting. Tourists are turned away at gunpoint. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps patrols every inch of coastline. Even Iranian citizens need special clearance to set foot on it. Iran calls it the Forbidden Island. Its real name is Kharg, and 90% of Iran's oil exports flow through it. Last night, Trump bombed it. He posted on social media that the United States Central Command had executed, in his words, one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East. He said every military target on the island was obliterated. Then he added one more line. He said he chose not to destroy the oil infrastructure. But if Iran keeps blocking ships in the Strait of Hormuz, he will immediately reconsider that decision. That is not a victory. That is a threat. And what happens next could either end this war or crash the global economy in ways we have not seen in a generation. Here is why one tiny island matters this much. Kharg is a coral outcrop roughly 5 miles long and 2 miles wide. It sits in the northern Persian Gulf, about 300 miles northwest of the Strait of Hormuz. And it has one feature that most of Iran's coastline does not: deep water. The surrounding gulf is shallow and silty, but around Kharg, the water is deep enough for supertankers to pull directly up to the jetties and load millions of barrels at a time. Iran built its entire oil export economy around that single geographic advantage. And here is a detail that makes everything about this story stranger. The original oil terminal on Kharg was built in the 1960s by the American oil company Amoco. Americans designed the infrastructure. Americans engineered the pipelines. Americans turned a quiet coral island into the nerve center of Iran's economy. And last night, Americans bombed it. The terminal can load 10 supertankers simultaneously. Pipelines run from Iran's biggest offshore and onshore oil fields straight into Kharg's storage tanks and out to sea. The terminal has a loading capacity of roughly 7 million barrels per day. 950 million barrels of crude pass through this island every single year. Before the war, most of it went to China. Without Kharg, Iran cannot sell oil. Without oil revenue, Iran cannot fund its military, cannot pay its government workers, cannot maintain control over its own population. One analyst put it plainly: if they cannot sell their own oil, they cannot make payroll. Kharg Island is not just infrastructure. It is the beating heart of the Iranian state. That is why it was forbidden. That is why the IRGC guarded it like a vault. And that is why, for 2 full weeks of war, with American and Israeli jets hitting everything else in Iran, Kharg Island sat completely untouched. Think about that. Nuclear sites, destroyed. Missile launchers, destroyed. Air defenses, command centers. IRGC headquarters. The supreme leader himself, killed on the first day. But Kharg? Nothing. Not a single strike for 14 straight days. Every military analyst watching this war had the same question. Why? The answer is simple. Kharg is a hostage that works better alive. If Trump destroys the oil terminals, Iran loses its economic lifeline, but the world loses those barrels too. Oil is already above $100 a barrel. Brent crude briefly touched 120. JP Morgan warned that if Kharg goes offline, as much as half of Iran's national oil output could be at risk, and the assumed 20-day storage buffer would vanish from day one. Analysts at Oxford Economics warned that sustained prices above 140 could push Europe, Japan, and the United Kingdom into outright recession. Destroy Kharg and you are not just punishing Iran. You are punishing every country that buys oil on the global market, including your own. So Trump did something surgical. He hit the military installations, the Joshan Sea Base, the airport control tower, the helicopter hangars, the air defenses. Over 15 explosions were reported. Thick smoke rose across the island. Iranian state media confirmed the strikes hit army defense positions across the facility. But the oil tanks, the pipelines, the loading jetties, the supertanker berths, those were left standing, on purpose. The message was not subtle. I can end your economy with one phone call. Open the strait or I make that call. And here is where a third player enters the picture. Because while Trump holds a gun to Iran's oil infrastructure, Iran may be about to cut a deal that hurts America without a single bullet. Reports emerged that Iran is considering reopening the Strait of Hormuz on one condition. Oil tankers that pass through must trade their cargo in Chinese yuan, not American dollars. Even during the war, Iranian and Chinese-flagged tankers have been quietly slipping through the strait while everyone else is blocked. Iran's oil is still moving. It is just moving to Beijing. If this deal goes through, it would be the first major crack in the petrodollar system, the agreement that has kept global oil trade denominated in US dollars for over 50 years. Trump bombed Kharg to pressure Iran into reopening the strait, but Iran may use that very pressure to hand China something the United States has spent decades preventing: a foothold in the global oil currency market. The bomb that was supposed to weaken Iran might end up weakening the dollar. But Iran's calculations go deeper than currency deals, because they saw the Kharg strike coming, and they prepared for it. In the weeks before the war, satellite imagery showed Iran quietly draining Kharg's storage tanks. In mid-January, 27 tanks were full. By early March, only 9 had oil in them. Iran increased exports to 3 times the normal rate in the final days before the strikes began. They moved as much crude off the island as they physically could. They also started shifting some export capacity to backup terminals at Lavan Island and Siri Island, further south in the Gulf. Smaller, less efficient, but functional. This is the same playbook Iran has used before, because Kharg has been bombed before, and what happened last time should worry every person watching this. Kharg Island has been a target for as long as it has been valuable. The Portuguese seized it during the colonial era, the Dutch took it, the British held it. Empires have fought over this 5-mile strip of coral since before anyone knew what oil was. Ancient ruins still sit on the island, a Christian monastery from the 7th century, Persian inscriptions carved into coral rock over 2,500 years ago. Every generation builds on top of the last, and every generation eventually watches it burn. From 1980 to 1988, Saddam Hussein's Air Force targeted Kharg relentlessly. Iraq declared an exclusion zone around the island and sent wave after wave of bombers. They destroyed storage tanks, they cratered loading platforms, they set the island on fire over and over again. By the fall of 1986, most of the terminal infrastructure had been severely damaged or knocked completely offline, and Iran kept repairing it. Every time Iraq destroyed a section, Iranian engineers rebuilt it. Oil never stopped flowing entirely. Iran rerouted what it could through the backup terminals at Lavan and Siri, absorbed the damage, and kept going. 8 years of continuous bombing, and Iraq never managed to permanently shut Kharg down. After the war ended, Iran spent years rebuilding and expanding the facilities. They hardened the infrastructure, they added redundancy. In the years before this current war, they added an extra 2 million barrels of crude storage capacity. They made Kharg more resilient than it has ever been against exactly the kind of attack Trump just launched. So the question hanging over this entire conflict right now is whether one American bombing raid, even a massive one, can accomplish what 8 years of Iraqi air power could not. Trump may already be preparing to answer that question with boots on the ground. Hours before the Kharg bombing, the Pentagon announced it was deploying 2,500 Marines and an amphibious assault ship to the Middle East. The Wall Street Journal reported the Japan-based USS Tripoli and its attached Marines are already heading to the region. Reports suggest additional elements of the larger 1st Marine Expeditionary Force could follow. Military analysts are reading the deployment as preparation for one thing: ground operations to seize Kharg Island. Taking the island with Marines would give the United States physical control over Iran's oil exports. It would strangle Iran's economy overnight. One defense commentator put it bluntly: when you think of a Marine Expeditionary Unit in the context of this conflict, one target comes to mind: Kharg Island. But military experts are sounding alarms. The island is only 15 miles from the Iranian mainland. Any force on Kharg would be within range of Iranian missiles, artillery, and drone swarms around the clock. Holding it would require a permanent defensive umbrella, continuous resupply by sea, constant naval protection thousands of miles from home. Iran would bombard it with everything they have left. And proxy groups across the region, from the Houthis to Iraqi militias, could target the shipping routes and supply lines keeping the garrison alive. One analyst from the Defense Post warned that seizing Kharg risks transforming the entire nature of this war. Right now, the conflict is built around airstrikes. The moment American boots land on Iranian territory, it becomes an occupation. And occupations are where empires go to bleed. And there is another problem no one in Washington seems to be talking about. 8,000 Iranian civilians live on Kharg Island. Families, workers, children. They live next to the oil terminals, next to the military bases, and now next to the bomb craters. If Marines storm the island, those civilians are caught in the crossfire of a ground war on a piece of land 5 miles long with nowhere to run. It gets worse. Reports indicate the Pentagon is also looking at Keshem Island, a much larger island sitting directly in the center of the Strait of Hormuz itself. Keshem is 68 miles across and heavily fortified with underground bunkers. Controlling it would reduce the most immediate threats to passing ships. But one military writer compared a ground assault on Keshem to the Battle of Okinawa in the Second World War. When Trump was asked directly whether he was thinking about seizing Kharg, he called the question foolish. Then he said he could change his mind in seconds. That ambiguity is deliberate. The threat of a ground invasion is a weapon in itself, but Iran has its own countermove waiting, and it could make everything we have seen so far look like a warm-up. Iran has been striking oil facilities across the Gulf for 2 straight weeks. Drone strikes on Saudi Arabia's Sheba oil field, missiles at refineries in the UAE, fuel storage tanks damaged in Oman. Qatar shut down gas production entirely and declared force majeure on its contracts. Iran's parliament speaker warned publicly that if its islands are attacked further, the country will abandon all restraint. And when Iran says all restraint, the target list is terrifying. Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia, the largest oil export terminal on Earth. Abqaiq, the processing facility that handles the majority of Saudi crude. In 2019, a single Houthi drone and missile attack on Abqaiq knocked out 5% of global oil supply in one night. Iran has far more firepower now than the Houthis used then. Here is the math that keeps Pentagon planners awake at night. If Trump destroys Kharg, Iran loses roughly 1.5 million barrels per day of exports. Painful. But Iran has already drained the storage, shifted capacity to backup terminals, and accepted the economic hit. They can survive it, at least in the short term. But if Iran retaliates by destroying Ras Tanura and Abqaiq, the world loses far more oil than Kharg ever supplied. The price does not stop at 140. The IRGC has publicly told the world to expect $200 a barrel. Both sides are now holding the global economy hostage. Iran holds the Strait of Hormuz, Trump holds Kharg Island, and each one is daring the other to pull the trigger first. Meanwhile, 2,500 Marines are sailing toward the Gulf. 300 ships sit stranded in the Persian Gulf with nowhere to go. Oil is above $100 and climbing. Fertilizer shipments have stopped. Gas prices are rising in every country on Earth. And 8,000 civilians are living on a 5-mile island that has just become the most dangerous piece of real estate on the planet. The Portuguese fought over this island. The Dutch took it, the British held it, the Americans built the oil terminal on it, Iraq bombed it for 8 years and could not kill it. And last night, Donald Trump pointed the most powerful military in human history at it and said, "This is your last warning." Kharg Island was forbidden for a reason, not because of what it hides, but because of what happens to the world when someone threatens it. This channel covers the wars most people do not understand until it is too late. The strategies, the weapons, the decisions that reshape the map while everyone else is still catching up. Subscribe now, because what Trump does next with this island will not wait for you to be ready.